Studio 10 will not be returning to our morning time of 10 a.m. every morning in 2024, unfortunately.
So we've got a few weeks left to bring a little joy, a little happiness, just to take you away from the troubles of the day and come and spend a fun couple of hours with us before we wrap up on the 22nd of December.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And that was Angela Bishop and Tristan McManus, hosts of the show on 10 that nobody watched, which finally got the chop last week. Only 2 weeks after, the crew was celebrating a decade on air. And the axing must have been a nasty surprise for Bishop, who was recently rattling off all the shows returning in 2024.
The Project, 10 News First Midday and Studio 10!
Hey!
But the end of Studio 10 was no great surprise to others, as showbiz reporter Peter Ford was telling 6PR on Wednesday.
Realistically, they just never pulled in the sort of numbers they need to have to make it successful and to compete against two other shows, one on 9 and one on 7.
And indeed, their capital city ratings were woeful. This year, Studio 10's been averaging between 20 and 30,000 bums on seats, sometimes going as low as 10,000. And to give you some idea of just how dire that is, the morning show on 7 and Today Extra on 9 get close to 100,000. But it's not just Studio 10 that is causing heartache at the network. Evening panel show The Project, which holds up the nightly primetime schedule, is also struggling. Once heralded as the new way to do TV current affairs, it has been hit with a spate of departures and falling ratings, which had media analyst Peter Cox telling us last week.
The Project has got to go. It is just a matter of time.
At its launch in 2009, The Project pulled in an audience of 1.2 million viewers.
Welcome to the 7pm Project. Thanks for joining us.
But last week, the 7pm show averaged 224,000 across the capital cities, with Cox blaming much of the recent decline on the fact that stars like Peter Hellier and Carrie Bickmore have left. Meanwhile, one insider says the show is a sad copy of its former self and claims it has lost its edge. And as evidence, they point to fewer punchy editorials from Waleed Ali to boost the programme's profile and rack up millions of views online, like this one about ISIS in 2015.
And I'm pretty sure that right now, none of us wants to help these bastards.
Another insider says the entire network is struggling, and it is true. Last year, 10 came fourth in the ratings, behind the ABC. And as former Project host Peter Van Onselen pointed out in May, after he left the network...
In Sydney just this month, 10's news share dropped to a meagre 6%, a new low that one rival news executive told me he'd never seen in 30 years in the business.
As a third commercial network, 10 has generally struggled to make money and has twice been bought out of bankruptcy. But its current problems are shared across the TV industry. As Tim Burrows, publisher of the media newsletter Unmade, told Media Watch,
TV viewing habits have changed radically, and because 10's audience is the youngest, it's happened to 10 fastest. Streaming has become a major alternative way of viewing TV content.
And, says Burrows, streaming is where 10's owner Paramount is now focused, after missing out on big sporting contracts like the AFL and cricket, which could have been a money spinner for the channel. But to that, Peter Cox says bluntly...
Yes, but it won't work. There are too many streaming services in Australia.
And where does that leave the free-to-air network? Cox fears its decline will continue, and he tells Media Watch...
I am very pessimistic on its future, but they would have trouble finding someone who wanted to buy it.
That is a very bleak forecast. But some 10 staffers are optimistic, saying being owned by a streaming giant could be what saves them. And the network told us it remained committed to the project and that...
In 2024, we will be refocusing our efforts on increased news and current affairs content.
Which it says includes more news bulletins and a new morning lineup. But now, to Gaza and the ongoing war, with last week's big question for the media being, was the Hamas headquarters underneath the Al-Shifa hospital? Israel and the Americans were convinced it was, and News Corp was equally certain, with Thursday's front page in The Australian announcing...
War on Hamas's hospital HQ.
And Yoni Bashan telling readers in a separate Page One story...
Above ground is an overrun hospital. Below the surface is a military nerve centre so vast that even terrorists captured on October 7 were happy to gossip about it with interrogators.
Most senior Hamas political and military officials are hiding in the hospitals, especially in Shifa,
one Hamas operative said during questioning.
And the Australian's editorial also allowed no doubt that it was there, declaring,
Israel plunges into pit of terror, shielded by hospital.
And claiming that the IDF's precise and targeted operation inside Al-Shifa would be
a pivotal development in the war.
So, when Israeli soldiers went in to root out the terrorists, what did they find? Short answer, not quite what we were led to expect. The IDF claimed in a tweet in late October that the Al-Shifa hospital was the main headquarters for Hamas terrorist activity and offered this intelligence-based video of a major complex concealed underneath. But straight after last week's raid, Trey Yingst from Fox News brought us this reality from the scene.
They are still searching at this hour for the tunnels that they say are beneath the hospital, but they did recover weapons they say belong to Hamas in an MRI room here on one side of the facility. And when you look behind the machine, you see the weapons and ammunition the Israelis say Hamas had ready to go.
IDF spokesperson Colonel Jonathan Conricus also took video footage of a tour of part of the hospital to show what soldiers had found, including weapons, backpacks and booklets. But that left many journalists unconvinced, with the New York Times visual investigations expert Eric Toller tweeting,
No tunnels, command centres, etc. to be found in any of these clips or pictures.
So, was the Hamas headquarters there? We still don't know, but its commanders certainly weren't. On Friday, Israel released stills and video of more weapons, and today this video of what does appear to be a tunnel, ending in a metal door. But for now, it's still unclear, lost in the fog of war. And in the meantime, disinformation battles on social media continue and become even more intense. On Wednesday, Israeli social media influencer Edie Cohen, who calls himself a journalist, PhD and expert on Arab affairs, tweeted,
Our soldiers are inside Hamas tunnels.
And 4.7 million people got his message. But it turned out the footage was from 2022. And the New York Times investigation revealed
This isn't a Hamas tunnel, it's an old transmitter facility in Sweden.
Meanwhile, at another Gaza hospital, CNN broadcast a senior IDF spokesman's claim to have found a room where hostages had been held.
This is a guarding list. Every terrorist has his own shift.
In this room, he says, a guard list that begins October 7th.
Only for CNN to delete it after it was revealed that the names on the calendar were days of the week. But far crazier and more serious claims than that are being made on both sides. On 28th of October, in a tweet viewed almost 1 million times, a 24-year-old self-described Make America Great Again communist called Jackson Hinkle, who believes Joe Biden is controlled by a satanic deep state cabal, proclaimed,
Hamas is not guilty of the atrocities on October 7th.
Hinkle claimed Israel had killed its own civilians with tanks, crossfire and airstrikes. And in another tweet, viewed more than 5 million times, Hinkle said Hamas had burned, raped and tortured no one, claiming, read the dead,
50% were Israeli soldiers. Burns occurred from Israeli shelling. No beheaded babies. Number of people Hamas shot, less than 100.
Hinkle sourced those claims to an investigation by the Israeli paper Haaretz, which he said had exposed Israeli lies. But Haaretz immediately denied it, saying his claims were blatant lies and had absolutely no basis in Haaretz's reporting. Hinkle has been banned from YouTube, WhatsApp and Instagram for spreading false information. But he still commands a huge following on other social media platforms like Rumble, Telegram and X, where he has 2.1 million followers and claims to be its most viral account. But Hinkle's not the only one trying to absolve Hamas for the atrocities that kicked off the war. Piers Corbyn, brother of the former UK Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn, has claimed the hostages taken by Hamas may just be actors and says Israel green-lighted the October 7 massacre so it could steal Gaza's oil.
The Israeli government wanted to allow it to happen.
Do I understand correctly you're saying it was basically a false flag operation?
Yes, it was a false flag operation. It was an excuse, a pretext to launch this genocide attack.
It is crazy and depressing that millions of people believe this stuff. But some of the myths and lies spread by Israel supporters are also abhorrent. We've been told repeatedly that Hamas's casualty figures, showing thousands of civilian deaths, can't be trusted. But we're also now being told that wounded Palestinians we see on TV are faking it. This tweet and video, with 1.8 million views, is from Amjad Taha, a well-known Arab Israeli influencer based in the UK.
He wakes up, no bandages, fake blood, does a grand reveal, 0 injuries. It's all just an Oscar-worthy performance for the camera.
That video was also shared by Australia's Imam of Peace, who Media Watch has tangled with in the past, racking up 3.9 million views.
He is fine. It's just an act, Mummy. It's called Pallywood.
As in, Palestine meets Hollywood. Why anyone in Gaza would waste time faking injuries when the hospitals are full of dead and injured is not explained. But it has been debunked by journalists from BBC Verify, who found the full video on Instagram, showing the man being brought to hospital in an ambulance.
The man isn't faking. The video was posted on Instagram by journalist Mohamed Awad.
And a similar claim of Palestinians faking injuries from the Israeli PM's spokesperson to the Arab world, Ophir Gendelman, has also been debunked by BBC Verify, which revealed
it's behind-the-scenes footage of a Lebanese short film about Palestinians called The Reality, as stated by the film's director.
And another Israeli spokesperson, Mark Regev, was challenged forcibly on that last week by MSNBC's Mehdi Hassan.
You said propaganda. Can we just deal with your colleague Ophir Gendelman's tweet? It's still up 7 days later. Why has it not come down? It's a Lebanese short film. We can put it on screen. It's not Palestinians faking their own injuries. Can we own up to that mistake and take that down? Is that not propaganda?
Once again, I understand that was also a mistake. And
so why is it still up 7 days later?
I'll speak to Ophir about it if you like. I'll speak to Ophir about it if you like.
And talking of mistakes, though much more quickly corrected, the ABC apologised last week for one of its own. With the 7 p.m. bulletin running footage they said was of patients inside the Al-Shifa hospital running and hiding from Israeli soldiers, which had been posted as such on X, but was in fact from 2013 in Egypt. It is getting harder and harder to know what's genuine, which of course is the aim of those who spread this stuff. But in the meantime, there are still real journalists in Gaza whose reports can be trusted. But at the latest count, at least 48, mainly Palestinian journalists, have lost their lives. At least 9 of them killed with members of their families by airstrikes on their homes. And those who are still on the front line face daily danger, even in southern Lebanon, just across the Israeli border.
بهذا الإطار فأعطيناكم الصورة.
Luckily, those journalists survived. They claim they were targeted. The Israeli military did not respond to requests for comment. But now, to the latest in a long-running feud in Victoria, starring you-know-who. It's now 7 weeks since Dan Andrews stepped down as Premier to spend more time on the links. And News Corp's Herald Sun is still taking pot shots as he walks into retirement.
The source.
Portsea Golf Club power brokers don't want Daniel Andrews.
The source is the paper's gossip column, which features hot stories like Tina Arena's Aria snub or how gatecrasher Granny got into the AFL Granny. Yes. And last week, the column was teeing off at Dan Andrews, claiming he'd missed the cut for entry to one of Victoria's, quote, elite golf clubs.
A little birdie has told the Herald Sun that Andrews' high-flying business mate Max Beck quietly approached Portsea Golf Club power brokers to lay down a marker for Dan and test the waters as to whether he might be able to join.
And the mail was not good, as the Herald Sun told us next day with this front-page exclusive.
Dan's golf shot lands in rough.
Which, on page 7 of the paper, morphed into...
It's war. Dan misses cut.
Angry Portsea golfers have strongly rebuffed a proposal for the ex-Premier to be considered for membership.
Their alleged rebuff, according to the Herald Sun, going back to Dan's long and harsh COVID restrictions.
With courses closed for extended periods and golfers required to play in protective masks.
Now, this storm in a teacup was such a good story that the Daily Mail couldn't resist taking it further and getting it wrong by saying Dan had been blocked from joining and calling it an embarrassing defeat. While news.com.au also went into overdrive by suggesting the ex-Premier was on permanent lockdown from the Portsea Club. And on 3AW, Neil Mitchell was inviting former golf pro Mark Allen, who is not the professional at Portsea, to join the pile-on.
On Friday night at the Sorrento Hotel, it was the talk of the region, and to the point where not only members from Portsea but members from other clubs were saying that if he's trying to join anywhere down here, they just will not let him join.
You reckon the whole peninsula or Blackburn?
Yeah, absolutely.
Blacklisted from all courses. Now you're talking. allowing the Herald Sun to have another swing at the story and repeat the claim. And next day there was more, with the paper's columnist Rita Panahi celebrating Dan's, quote, club rejection with this kicker.
As they say in the classics, karma's a bitch.
But a few hours later came the spoiler, with the president of the Portsea Golf Club telling members that Andrews hadn't been blocked, rejected or blacklisted.
We wish to clarify that, contrary to these reports, no formal membership proposal for Mr Andrews has been received by the club.
End of story? Of course not. Because that night on Sky News, shock jock commentator Steve Price was issuing the club with this stern warning.
If Dan Andrews is allowed to join the Portsea Golf Club, I'll quit, I'll resign, I'll tear up my membership, and I'll go and play golf somewhere else.
Why? Why can't you play golf alongside the former Premier?
This is the Premier who stopped us playing golf for 2 years during COVID.
Yes, really, unleashing a new round of ridiculous headlines. But therein lies the success of the original Herald Sun story, finding a morsel of gossip which then took on a life of its own, generating by our count more than 50 media stories. All in 4 days, and all based on the whisper that if Dan Andrews were to become a member of the Portsea Golf Club, some members would not be happy. Talk about a beat-up. But when it comes to stories on Dan Andrews, that is par for the course. That's all from us for tonight. You can read statements about Channel 10 from Paramount Australia and Tim Burrows on our website. Don't forget Media Bites on Facebook, YouTube and Instagram. But for now, till next week, goodbye.